Hello, everybody. This one is from last week's meditation session, but for some reason it didn't record. So I'm just going to go over the main points today, and I'll skip the actual meditation because it was only short anyway. There was a lot of discussion. So in last week's session, we were talking about what we really are, and it's a really challenging set of concepts to explore because it challenges the very paradigm by which we construct the world around us. So as ever, I'm not trying to convince you of something. I'm not saying believe in this, it's right and you're wrong. I'm simply trying to encourage self-investigation or exploration, and trying to get you to just consider that maybe things don't fit as you imagine, and maybe there is a better way to look at some things. So, we've talked so far about the mistaken beliefs that we hold around where to find happiness or where to find peace in our life. We explored something that most of us are now very aware of, which is that um, for our entire lives we've pursued happiness by trying to make the external world fit what we think are just the right conditions for the arising of happiness. So we try to manipulate everything and everyone in subtle or unsubtle ways so that it all falls into line with what we think is best. So whether that's like getting the job that we think will finally make us happy, or the correct partner, or the right pair of trainers, or getting rid of things we don't like, and so on and so on. We try to manipulate everything. I don't like to use manipulate in a negative sense, but yeah, we try and steer things or change things so that they fit how we think they should be. So we chase things that we think bring happiness, and we run away from or avoid things or reject things that we think bring unhappiness. And like I said, those things might be material things like unpleasant boss or a better car or a better job, or they might be metaphysical things like not physical, such as um, endless obsession with thinking and planning and scheming and worrying and so on and so on. And this chasing after things and running away from things are said to be two of our kleshas or misunderstandings. Sometimes they're called ignorances, but I don't really like the word ignorance, so I find it better to use misunderstanding. Um, and those misunderstandings are desire and aversion. Really, they're both desire. They're both desire for things to be otherwise than they actually are. So we either desire thing to have things, or we desire not to have things. But they're all this desiring for life to be not as it actually is. Like rather than being able to just live with life as it is, we're constantly trying to create this imaginary life that isn't, which brings us huge amounts of suffering because it's inevitable that life or reality will never actually consistently match up to how we think it should be. And that suffering arises because we can't accept that fact. We don't see that that's ridiculous. And therefore, we keep fighting this impossible battle. So we're constantly struggling uphill to achieve something that's inachievable. But these misunderstandings about the source of happiness themselves arise from a much greater misunderstanding. So we do all of those things because we want to create greater happiness for ourselves. No one, as we've discussed, nobody tries to create unhappiness, even if they apparently create miserable circumstances. Um, in some way, it pleases them or satisfies them to be miserable or to be a martyr or to suffer, in obvious ways. It's strange, but we don't ever do anything that makes us unhappy. It's just the way you're framing the phrase or the term unhappy. So these misunderstandings about where our happiness lies, like by creating a world that we think is how we want it to be, these misunderstandings are underlaid by a much greater misunderstanding, which is what we're going to talk about today. And that misunderstanding is that we exist as and are confined to this body and this mind. Um, so, like, I am Dan. Dan is this body I can see here, and Dan is this mind that's ticking away inside with all these thoughts and worries and so on and so on. That doesn't seem like such a bad thing. This is like, okay, ooh, seems pretty obvious. This is what I am. So, how does that become the source of all our suffering? Right. Okay. So, the desires that we just talked about, those desires, the clinging and the aversion and the desire for things to be different to how they are, they arise because if we believe that we're limited to this body, then of course our instinct is to preserve and prolong the existence of this body and mind that we think inhabits it for as long as we can. Therefore, everything else we perceive appears to be outside of this body and is, as a result, an unpredictable entity. And because it's an unpredictable entity, the world around us, we can't predict it, it therefore has the potential to impact the chance of our existence for better or worse. But we don't like that unpredictability, that uncertainty. We're unhappy about that. It doesn't bring us happiness. So often people will align happiness with certainty when you start to explore it. If I can create more certainty for myself, I often mistake that as being happiness. So all of this desiring arises as an effort to put all these unpredictable, uncertain things in order, like people with opinions and weather and, I don't know, cars that might crash into me or bills I might have to pay, to put all these things in such an order that they will create the circumstances that favor the existence of this body mind, and they will favor it by creating greater certainty. So, for example, like, I might work really hard. I'm so worried I need better medical insurance in case I get sick, and then I'll be able to get healed, or I'll get life insurance. So that, the worry that my family won't be able to look after themselves if this body passes away, at least that little worry is addressed. So all this desiring to put all these external things in just the right order, convince people that what I'm saying is right, and then we can all agree and we can all be happy. But we only do that because we're trying to create greater certainty. And as the certainty increases, we see that we suffer less, or we think we suffer less. So really, certainty, suffering, and happiness are all very tangled up in this thing. So it sort of makes total sense. Well done, very logical us. So no wonder we're so busy in life getting everything sorted and in line, or trying to, because we equate certainty with less suffering, and we equate less suffering with more happiness. But that only makes sense from the paradigm of that underlying belief that underlies all other beliefs, that we are limited to this body and this mind within the body. And if that ceases, then we cease. It doesn't make sense, apart from the obvious fact that it's certainly impossible to create certainty in the world. There's just infinite variables around us. We will never bring order to that. It will never line up how we want it. Um, but we never question that first assumption. I am the body and the mind, and that's my limit. And that lack of questioning our underlying assumption is the very first reason that we never stop looking in the wrong places for happiness. So, as long as we believe ourselves to be this body and mind, we will always be looking in the wrong place for happiness. So, although this seems like a massive leap of faith, that, okay, maybe I'm not the body and the mind, let's just look at some other ideas. For a long time, everyone thought that God was a big fat bloke in the sky with a white beard. And if we sinned, we'd go to hell. And people thought the earth was flat. And some people still do. And at those times, only very few people had the foresight to disagree with those ideas. And, those people were called heretics, or were dismissed as being mad. But turns out that after a while, the rest of them, be right. So just because something questions a complete paradigm that we hold, a totally conditioned idea, it doesn't mean that there's no value in it, or that it's just it should be thrown out, thrown out without investigating it. So to check it out, to unravel it, we need to go back to what we can trust as what we actually know, not with what we've been told, not what we've been taught, not what we've been conditioned to believe, but what we know and what we can verify through our own experience. So we start with the basic truth, and I invite you to investigate this. That basic truth is I know that I am. And I use the term I loosely. I'm not referring to the body or the thoughts. I'm referring to this a sense. If I'm not looking at the body, if I'm not aware of any thoughts, there is a sense that I exist or I am. Simple as that. I know. If someone asked me, do you exist? Yeah, I'd say yes. There's no question about it. I wouldn't need to look down at a body and check my body was there. I just know I exist. There is this underlying feeling. And that feeling is our first thought. And that first thought we ever have is the thought I. And every single thought we ever have about the world comes and originates from that thought I. And it doesn't mean, that can be very subtle, but that thought I is always there, uh, underlying everything. So our mind is, in reality, a bundle of thoughts, and every thought springs from that thought I, or you might call it a feeling I or a sense I, because it's like the subtlest of all thoughts. It's not like a gross, overt thought. This is a very subtle thought. So there is this thought, this feeling, this sense I exist or I am. And it subtly precedes every other thought because it is the subject that views all other objects. Okay, I'll just repeat that again. There has to be this sense I, or this feeling I am, I exist, because that I am, that I exist, is the subject that views all other objects, all experiences, whether those objects are secondary thoughts that follow it, or whether those are sense perceptions, such as what the eye hears and sees, and so on. So, this first thought I is a sort of tangle, if you like, that arises between pure knowing consciousness, just awareness, and the body, if you like. So you've got this pure sentient knowing awareness, and then this unsentient body, which is just stuff. Yeah. And between them, there's like this sort of tangle that results in this first thought or this feeling I. Okay. So it's almost like the awareness accidentally it's aware of everything, but it somehow mistakes itself to be limited to the body that it's aware of. Yeah. So I'm not saying the body doesn't exist at all. This is something that gets the body exists within awareness, or is known by awareness. But for some reason, that body gets taken to be the I. Whereas actually, what the I purely is, if you take one step back, is just the awareness. The awareness is that which is aware of everything, including the body, even including the thought I. Okay. So I did say it wasn't going to be easy. I did say it was going to be a tough one to get your head around. So this has to be chewed over really slowly and thoughtfully. So let's move on a little bit. We can always come back to that if we need to. So we know anyway. We know that we exist, or there is this I that exists. We feel this, and then we normally add subtly this assumption that the I is this body and the mind bound up with it. So all of those thoughts that come on after that first sense I we tangle up and we believe that all those thoughts are inherently what we are as well. We believe that those thoughts come out of and originate from this body, but actually we are aware of all of the thoughts. We are aware of the sense I. We are aware of the body. That doesn't necessarily mean that any of those things are what we are. See, we're limiting ourselves to just certain things within the awareness. But that doesn't make sense because the awareness precedes all of those things. So there is this consciousness, there is this awareness, yeah. And the limited form of that consciousness is um, I, is this sense I. It's a slightly limited form. The ultimate form is just the pure consciousness, the pure awareness, or the knowing. There are then things or objects that are perceived within that consciousness. For example, um, the body is known in consciousness, awareness to be aware of them. To very much like the old Zen koan, if a tree falls down in the forest, does it make any sound if there's no one there to hear it? It's very difficult because we're using the mind to try and just unravel a koan or a puzzle that's sort of unravelable and not unravelable. So there are these objects, there are these things that are perceived or known by the consciousness that exist within the awareness. So even the body and the mind exist in the awareness, within the consciousness. Now, here's a tricky one. This is a bit of a jump. From the point of view of the awareness, or the consciousness, which is the primary experience, are the body or the thoughts made up of anything else than the awareness of them? So if I'm aware of my hand, I'm looking at my hand, and there is the awareness of my hand. If there wasn't, then there would be no hand to look at. But from the point of view of awareness, the hand is only made up of awareness. It is just the awareness of the hand. And we might say, well, hold on. My hand is actually made up of matter, cells and atoms and so on and so on. And I taught A-level science, so I'm totally aware of what you're talking about. The idea that my hand is made of matter is simply the conscious awareness of a thought, of an idea, of a concept. It is the awareness of the concept of matter. It isn't my actual present experience of body or of the hand. That makes sense? So what we do is we look at things around us, say material things, and we make this huge jump or assumption that we are looking at material things separate to the body that we've assumed ourselves to be. Whereas actually we've unraveled that to say awareness comes before the body. It is awareness that knows the body and the mind and everything else, and knows these things that we think are outside of the body. But really, the awareness is just aware of sky, trees, sun, body. It is aware of all these things. There isn't really any way of specifically saying that the body is any more me than the other things that rest within the awareness that I am. And likewise, it is just an assumption to say that these things that I'm aware of and this body I'm aware of is made up of matter. That is the awareness of an idea about matter, an idea or a thought or a concept. It isn't our actual experience. Our experience is that the things that exist within our awareness are only made up of that awareness from the point of view of awareness. So I'm not for a second saying stuff doesn't exist. Don't get me wrong. I'm not just denying the world exists around me or this body doesn't exist. That would be totally stupid because it's there in my awareness. What I am saying is that it exists in a way that we don't perceive it to exist. Basically, it exists in a way that's different to how we imagine it to exist. So I'm not a nihilist or nihilist, however you pronounce it. I'm not denying the existence of the world. I'm only denying the existence of the world from a mistaken or misunderstood point of view. So if I had to have this hand amputated, taken off, the hand ceases to exist in the awareness of the eyes and ceases to exist from, even if I had my eyes closed, I could experience it through the awareness of sensation. The sensation doesn't look like a hand or anything. But if the hand was removed altogether, the hand would still exist, but it would only exist as an idea of the hand. The idea would then exist within awareness. Yeah, there would be this awareness of a hand idea. Um, and the same goes for an oak tree. I'm looking at a great big oak tree outside. It's enormous. Like, it must be made of matter. It's so big, but actually, it only exists as the awareness of what I'm seeing. It only exists if I close my eyes, of the awareness of the leaves rustling. But if I close my eyes and there's no wind, I can't hear it. I can't see it. All that actually exists within the reality of awareness is the memory, which is a thought. So the memory of that oak tree. We just hold on to the assumption that the oak tree is this thing there made of matter. But that is not our experience. Our experience only exists as awareness of these things, and these things are only made up of the awareness of them. It's a really tough one to chew over. It's Some people talk about it as a different. It's deeper and more complex than this, but at a superficial level, there is the difference between what are called materialists and idealists. So materialists believe that matter came first. There is this stuff called matter, and that somehow, in some matter, like us and animals, some sort of consciousness arose. So from matter, which is unconscious as far as we know, suddenly, inexplicably, consciousness and awareness appeared. And no one's ever been able to explain how that might have happened. And then on the other hand, you've got idealists, and idealists fall, again, all these camps are very, very divided and subdivided, but idealists in general believe that consciousness or awareness arose first, and then everything else arose out of that consciousness or that awareness. What I'm talking about sort of falls into those camps a little bit. Both, well, it definitely falls into the idealist camp far more, but it's not purely a philosophical idealist way of explaining things. So people say, well, okay, well, I walk around all day, and then like, I'm here, I'm here. There's stuff around me, da, da, da. There's awareness and so on. This stuff has to be here. It has to be solid. But yet, in a dream, when we're asleep at night and dreaming, our mind perceives us to be a totally different body, maybe. The dream version of me has absolutely no matter to it. The dream world that me seems to exist in has absolutely no matter in it. If you're going by the matter breeds consciousness model. But I totally and unquestionably believe my dream world to be true, to be absolutely real. I never think this isn't real, it's not made of matter. But yet it doesn't exist. We're totally happy with dreams not existing as material things, but yet we never question them. Is it such a great jump based upon all we've explored here to think maybe this world exists in exactly the same way as the dream world does, but it's just a huge, long, extended version of a dream, if you like, with continuity through it, or it appears to have continuity through it. So there's a lot to investigate here. But what we want to work on as our practice, and our practice always being experiential, coming from our experience of what is and working from that point, is our practice should be, what is this I? What is this sense I exist? Where does that come from? And rather than looking outwards all the time towards, you know, objects, or even meditative practices that simply just calm the mind, focusing on the breath and focusing on mantras and so on and so on. They don't ever ultimately answer this question that needs answering because it underlies everything else about our version of reality. And that is, who am I? What am I? The only way we can explore that is to keep returning to that first thought, I exist or I am, and rest with that for as long as we can until we find behind it the pure awareness or the pure consciousness from which even that most subtle of thoughts emerges. But to trace it back, we let go of everything else. We turn simply towards that idea, I exist, I am. Is that a feeling, a sense? I exist, I am. And we try to stay with this as long as possible. Slowly, the longer we're able to stay with it, all objects, all things that the subject perceives will dissolve, if you like, and we would just rest in this pure happiness of awareness, of consciousness, of knowing. There is nothing else that seems to be important or relevant at that point. And when we trace it back far enough, we will find where we come from, what we are, what I am. That's a massive topic. Don't try it as ever and force yourself to understand it. We can't force ourselves to understand concepts. They have to be believed through our experience. And then we will absolutely fundamentally start to understand that they are correct or incorrect. So investigate these ideas, investigate them through practice. Explore the feeling I am, explore the sense I am, keep returning to that, see where it leads you to. Hope that's useful. Look forward to seeing you in the next meeting. And as ever, any questions, just ping me an email, yogalikewwater.com, and I'll get back to you. All right. Thanks.